Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the QA strategy when it comes to CAT. I'm sure that all of you at some point of time have wondered as to why Quant is such a difficult thing to crack. Now, some of you may have done Quant very extensively. Maybe let's say you're an engineer, you had a decent exposure to say IIT JEE preparation and all of that. Or you could be somebody who is let's say a commerce or an art student. No matter what your background is, you may have different level of comfort with respect to the quant section, and basis that past experience you think that I may or may not be able to achieve a good score in this section. But if you get into the depth of the entire methodology of quant question selection and you understand the data really well, you will be able to have a better outcome. And that is what I'm going to focus on in this particular discussion. So let's first understand the question selection methodology, because if you get that right, it will be very easy for you to get the score that is required to firstly clear the sectional cutoff that is needed. And the second thing would be to score at a higher level. So what is this ABC methodology, right? At IMS, if you talk to any of the IMS mentors, you will realize that we keep talking about ABC methodology when it comes to question selection. So ABC stands for, the first thing is A, which is for the easy question. So abhi karo, right? So you do it right away. That is what it means. The second thing is B level or B, which is baad mein karo, right? So A, B, C, the B stands for baad mein karo. These are the medium questions that you're going to encounter on the CAT. And the final thing is going to be C. Now, these are the most difficult questions. A lot of people will be staying away from these questions in the actual test. And that is also what you are supposed to do. So as an aspirant, you don't really get brownie points for solving difficult questions. As long as you're doing the number of questions that is required to clear the cutoff and let's say whatever maximize your score, you should be fine. So you don't have to do everything that appears from the C category. And that is what we call chhod do, right? So abhi karo, baad mein karo and chhod do. So A, B, C. A are the questions that are easy. B are the moderate questions and C are the difficult questions. Now, if you look at our SimCats, for each of the questions that you have on the SimCat, we also give you a classification, whether it was an A question or a B question or a C question, depending on what we call the P value of a question. So those of you who have taken our SimCats, once you analyze your SimCats, you'll be able to see that for every question we have given that classification, and that is something that you can use to your advantage, right? So let's move on further, and I'm just going to walk you through this approach that is there, right? So what is going to be the approach when it comes to attempting any question? Now, the first thing that I'll do is, of course, I'll read the question. Now, unless I read the question, I'll not be able to figure out what kind of a question it is. So I'm going to read the question, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the categorization. So I'm going to say that in my mind, is it category A question, B question, or C question? Now, depending on your comfort with the topic, somebody's A question might be somebody's B question. So keep that in mind, that depending on your own comfort, the amount of preparation that you've done for any of the topics, this may change a little bit. So for somebody, maybe a time speed distance question is, let's say, a C category question. But for somebody, let's say that same question could be A category question. The third thing that I'm going to do is, depending on the categorization that I have done for myself, I'm going to do it. If it is A category question, I'll do it right away. If it is B, I'm going to do it in my second round once I've exhausted all the A category questions. And if it is C, I'll mostly not do it during the entire test, right? If at all, let's say I exhaust all the A's and the B's and there is still time, then I'm going to do the C category question that is there, right? So that is what we are going to focus on. Classification, whether it is A, B or C, A should be definitely done. B is something that you can do after you completed all the A questions. And then also if you have time, you can always do the C category questions that exist, right? So now let's talk about the data, because that is very, very important. So a lot of times students don't know how many questions do they need. They hear the word percentile and they think that, okay, the numbers will be very high to reach to that particular percentile. But percentile only indicates what percentage of the population have you beaten in that particular section on that particular day. It doesn't tell you anything much beyond that. So when you look at the percentile data, and this is very, very crucial, we have put together 21, 22, 23. So CAT 21, 22 and 23, last 3 years. If these are the approximate scores that are required to get to a certain percentile. Now, some of you may be thinking, oh, these are scaled scores, right? So how do I know whether that's the exact number that I need? Of course, that is not possible to predict because normalization is not in your control. So why worry about that? But at least it gives you a ballpark, right? For example, when you see something like a 30 in CAT 21 corresponded to 98 percentile. If you divide 30 by 3, it gives you 10. So roughly 10 questions is what we are talking about. Maybe it could have been 9, maybe it could have been 11. We don't know that because of the normalization. But again, is it something that you should be too much worried about? Not really. So I would say give it plus or minus 1 margin of error. And you can say, okay, fine, this 30, which corresponded to a 98th percentile in CAT 21, if I had got around 9, 10 or 11 questions correct, I would have been in a position to get to that particular percentile, right? So that is how you should be looking at this whole thing. If you look at the CAT 22 data, for example, right, look at 95 percentile is 23. If you look at CAT 23, which is last year, and by the way, last year's paper was difficult. A lot of people found it difficult, and it is quite evident from the number as well. So there was some drop. But what you will see is that that drop isn't something which is very, very significant. If you look at the drop that has happened, the drop, of course, has happened very significant at the higher levels, but at the lower levels, it hasn't happened that much. So if you see this drop, it's just only 2, right? 85, 14 to 11. So that would have been a matter of one question. So if you say that, okay, CAT 23 was extremely difficult, you have to understand firstly extremely difficult compared to what, right? So people who are used to the earlier difficulty 2020, 21, 22, they found it difficult, right? But it can't be classified as the most difficult quant that has ever appeared on the CAT. So keep that in mind. Now, there are some important things that you need to understand. Firstly, solving 4 to 5 questions is enough to clear the sectional QA cutoff. Now, 4 to 5 questions, roughly that will put you somewhere in the 12 to 15 mark kind of a zone on your raw score, right? Your scaled score can be different, but let's look at the raw score. 4 to 5 questions, right? 85 percentile is typically the sectional percentile cutoff that is needed. You would have easily cleared the cutoffs if you had done 4 to 5 questions in any of these years. So that is something that you need to understand. The next thing is that the gap between 85 and 95 percentile. So a lot of times students have this question, how do I move to the next level, right? What is that next level for you? So firstly, if you're planning to jump from 85 to 95, how many questions would you typically need? And that number is around 2 to 3 questions. So the gap between a 95 percentiler and an 85 percentiler is going to be roughly 2 to 3 questions. When you increase the amount of preparation that you're putting, right? When you solve more questions, when you add more topics to the arsenal that you have, you will be able to do this, right? So don't think that it is something that is beyond your reach. So it's definitely possible to go from say an 85 to 95, jump from a 95 to 19, and if you notice, this is 12, this is 10, and this is 8, right? Again, 3 to 4 questions, that is going to be the gap between a 95 to 99. And moving forward, yeah, as I discussed, the gap between 95 to 99, that's going to be 3 to 4 questions. Possibly don't look at the 100 percentile number, right? Because that number is going to be insanely large. And is that something that is even needed for a lot of people? The answer is no, right? So there is an unnecessary fear that is there when it comes to the quant section. And I've been an aspirant at some point of time, so I know what people talk about when they say, I'm so scared of quant. There is a reason for that, and I know what it is. But the point is, when you look at these sort of very, very high scores, right? First question that you should be asking is, am I going to need that, right? Am I going to need, let's say, 63 on the quant section? No, because my job will get done even if I'm lying somewhere here, right? If my objective is to get into a top tier business school, of course, you should be scoring at a very high level. Having said that, you may not need to get high on a particular section, right? As long as you have cleared the sectional cutoff and you're finding a balance, you should still be fine. So I'm not saying that you target at a lower end, I'm saying you target at the higher end, but at the same time, don't be scared of the numbers that you see on the right side of this particular table. Okay, so keep that in mind. I don't want anybody to get discouraged just by looking at the numbers. I would rather focus on the left hand side of the table that we just saw, right? And keep this with you. I'm sure that this is going to be very helpful. Now, how do you categorize questions, right? So that is something that we'll discuss now. The first thing is going to be familiarity, right? So have you solved similar questions in the past? For example, somebody sitting at the top of the building ends up dropping a ball and it keeps jumping to, let's say, 3/5 of the height from which it has fallen, and it continues till eternity. Find the distance that is covered by the ball, right? It's a very familiar question. So if you have done something like that, then you should attempt a question like that if it comes in the paper. But if you see something which is very arbitrary, maybe you're not seen anything like that, right? Let's say there is an insect, let's imagine having, let's say, 16 legs, and you're trying to put socks of 4 different colors, and there is some question associated with it. Does it make sense to do something like that if it is not familiar? The answer is no, I'm going to stay away from that. Second is going to be topic. Now, is it from something that I like, right? For example, if you ask me personally, I really like numbers, I like arithmetic, I like algebra. But if you give me something from, let's say, P and C, maybe my first instinct is going to be no, I'm not going to get into this. So everybody will have favorite topics or the least favorite topics or the topics that they absolutely hate. So basis that also, you will be doing your own categorization. So for me, is it A, B, C because of the topic that it is, right? So if it is from a particular topic, I'll take a call accordingly. The third thing is going to be concepts that are involved. So a lot of times you observe this, that if you give easy concepts to students, a lot of them will be able to solve it. The moment you increase complexity slightly, few students will be able to solve it. You increase that further, which is what happened in CAT 23, then a lot of people will not be able to solve it, correct? So in fact, last year I remember there was that question, right? I started looking at the questions and there was a question on three terms with logs in them being in AP, right? So if I give an AP question, a lot of people will be able to solve it. If I give a log question, a lot of people will be able to solve it. But what if I combine the two and give you a question that has log and AP, right? Then that is where the challenge comes, right? So a lot of people will not be able to do it. So can you handle the concepts that are required to crack a particular question? The next thing is going to be path to the solution. So can you visualize that path? Will I be able to figure out, okay, what are the first 2, 3 steps that I need to take to approach this particular question? If I'm not able to figure those out, then it may be a struggle, right? So when you read the question for the very first time, by the time you have reached to the end of the question, have you visualized what steps will you be needing, right? So if you say, for example, there's a question on profit loss discount, right? Two articles sold at the same SP on which there is X% profit and X% loss. What is the total thing? Now, if I know that at the end of the reading this question, there's a formula that I can directly use, and that is going to be the first step, right? Then I should enter. But if I'm not able to picture that, I'm still thinking, oh, should I be writing SP is equal to 1.2 times CP1, whatever. If that is going to be my struggle, then I should not get into it. And final thing is going to be estimated time. See, once you have solved enough number of questions, you start understanding how much time do I typically need to solve the questions. So what you should do is, those of you again who have taken SimCATs, you know that we give you question, that the time that you take per question, right? Now you may not be an IMS student at this point of time, so I would suggest that you consider joining. But even if you are taking some other mocks, I would just suggest you to have a look at the time that you are spending on every question, right? And at some point of time, you will realize that for every question type, there is some approximate number. So for example, maybe numbers question I'm typically able to do in 3 to 4 minutes. A TSD question, maybe I take 4 to 5 minutes. So should I be entering that when I face a question like that in the test, right? So that's the question that you should be analyzing, asking yourself through the analysis that you are doing, right? So can you solve it in 2 to 3 minutes? Now I'm going to give you two approaches, and I would have asked you this rather than showing you the answer, but I already shown it. The first is, look at all the questions and decide the ones that you want to solve, right? So I'm giving you all the questions that appear. Let's say if you look at the quant section, you look at all the questions in the beginning, maybe spend, let's say, 7, 8 minutes on that. And then you mark out that, okay, I'm going to do question number 3, 7, 9, 11, 17, and so on. Is that the approach that we recommend? The answer is no, right? Because what happens is there are two main reasons. Firstly, you might end up spending a lot of time and you might not have enough time to actually solve those questions. That's number one. The second thing is that there could be an unnecessary fear that you will get into, right? So let's say if I go through all the questions that are there in the section, and at the end of it, I realize, my God, the paper is so difficult. It will put me on a negative path, right? So that is what we don't want to happen. So it's better not to do this sort of an approach. Then what you should be doing, right? What you should do is look at 3 questions at a time. So when you look at any test, right, this is how your palette will appear. Now what I'm going to do is, let's say I begin my quant section. I look at question 1, 2, 3 very quickly. Okay, maybe I take, let's say, 1 minute, 1.5 minutes for that. Now I know question 1 is from numbers, question 2 is algebra, question 3 is geometry. Within that, what exactly it is, I'll also know that. So within numbers, let's say it is an application of remainders, right? Let's say within algebra, it is application of, let's say, sum of roots, product of roots. Now, basis my comfort and what classification I do for the question, I'll say that, okay, 2 looks easy. I'm going to solve that question right away. So 2 is A category question. Let me do that before I move to 4, 5, 6. Okay. Now, what this strategy will do is, it will ensure, first of all, that you are able to reach question number 22 at the end of whole thing. If you take, let's say, 1 minute to decide out of these three questions, and let's say 3 minutes to solve, in 4 minutes you have seen three questions, right? Would you have enough opportunity to reach to the end of this in 40 minutes? The answer is yes. So with this, you will still be able to look at all the questions and you have identified the easy ones and at least done the easy questions from the test. So that is the approach that I want all of you to try, irrespective of what level you are in. You could be a capable learner, advanced ninja. That is how we categorize the student performances. You could be anybody at this point of time. As long as you're able to do this, you should find yourself getting a reasonably good outcome at the end of this exercise. So try doing this whenever you take the next mock. Try this approach and let me know in the comments as to how it is working for you. So what do we do from here, right? So how do I strategize further? The first thing is going to be understanding the topic distribution, right? So when you look at CAT 23 and we are talking about the broad areas in quant, there are 5 broad areas. I'm sure all of you know it by now: arithmetic, algebra, geometry, modern math, and numbers. Now, when you look at slot 1, 2, 3 last year, look at the distribution and you will realize that roughly the number of questions were more or less the same. So 7, 7, 8 in arithmetic, 8, 8, 4 in algebra. So only that 4 is an aberration. Otherwise, geometry, almost equal numbers. Modern math, hardly any difference, 2 to 4 questions. Numbers is 1, 2, 3. So what do you realize from this is that last year arithmetic, algebra, geometry dominated. And we had actually, in fact, started calling it already as AAG, AG. So that is something that you can focus on. But if I want to decide that, okay, within geometry, maybe there's a particular topic that I don't really like, okay, I'll still do it. So don't say that I'll not do it, because we are recording this video in the month of July and you still have November, right? So you still have a lot of time. So what I'll do is I'll ensure that I do basics of everything. So I'm not going to run away from that. But when I actually go for the test, I may take that call that I am somebody who is not good at geometry when it comes to, let's say, a particular question type. If at all it appears, my first instinct is going to be, let me not get into that. Okay. But of course, do enough practice. So don't say that I'm going to run away from that. Do a lot of practice in the months that are ahead of you. So that is what you're supposed to do from here. So if I have to summarize the discussion that we have had so far, what you should be doing, right, in the next few days and months that lie ahead of you, for every question you solve from now on, you have to categorize it whether it is A, B, or C. Okay, just look at the question in your mind, make a decision. You don't have to write it anywhere. Just tell yourself, is it A, B, or C? And then you solve it and then check whether you got the classification right. So if you're able to solve it very quickly, 2 to 3 minutes, you got the right answer, definitely you were on point, right? You got the classification correct. But you thought that it is A, you ended up spending, let's say, 6, 7 minutes, then your categorization was wrong. So for all mismatches, understand why you went wrong in the classification. See, if I get better at classification, what will happen is on the D day, I will not touch the difficult ones. So whenever you say, right, that CAT is something where you have to score well, it is about selecting the right questions, but it is also about rejecting the wrong questions, right? Rejecting the questions that are going to be difficult for everybody who is taking the test. So please don't worry about those. Focus on the ones that you can really do well, do them properly, and you'll have a far better outcome. So that's it from my side. I hope this video has helped you and given you an overview of the quant strategy. Please try and follow it. Let me know what your experience was. If there's anything that you want to ask about quant when it comes to CAT, please let me know and you can do that through the comment window, right? So thanks everyone for joining and attending and watching this particular video. Wish all of you all the best and stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, do it right away. We are going to have a lot of content coming your way. So thanks for subscribing and wish you all the best once again. Bye.